Lee Do-hyun stood perfectly still as the medical scanner passed over his body. The blue light moved from his head to his feet, and he forced himself to breathe normally. To the machine, he looked like any other Vorthan diplomat. Gray skin, yellow, eyes and breathing holes on his neck that moved with each breath. The biosynthetic disguise had cost Earth's intelligence agency millions of credits, but it was worth every penny. "Clear," said the security guard, a massive creature with too many arms. Do-hyun nodded and walked through the checkpoint into the Galactic Council Station Omega-7. His fake identity papers said he was Thek Do-hyun, a mid-level translator for the Vorthan Embassy. The irony was not lost on him that he kept his first name. The station buzzed with activity. Aliens from dozens of species hurried through the corridors. Some walked on two legs like humans. Others slithered or floated. Do-hyun had spent 3 years learning to move like a Vorthan. Their steps were shorter, and they tilted their heads when listening. These small details kept him alive. His neural implant translated the chatter around him automatically. Most aliens were talking about the emergency session called by the Galactic Council. No one seemed to know why it was so urgent. Do-hyun pretended not to care, but his heart was racing. Earth had sent him here because they suspected something. Big was happening. The Vorthan Embassy was a tall, silver building in the diplomatic quarter. Do-hyun had worked here for 6 months now, slowly building trust with his supposed colleagues. Ambassador Thekskar treated him like any other low-ranking staff member, which was exactly what Do-hyun wanted. "Thek!" called a voice behind him. Do-hyun turned to see Rix Allen, another Vorthan diplomat. "The ambassador wants all translation staff in the main briefing room. Now." Do-hyun followed Rix Allen through the embassy halls. The walls were covered with art from the Vorthan homeworld, twisted metal sculptures that looked like screaming faces. Do-hyun had learned to appreciate Vorthan culture during his training, even if it gave him nightmares. The briefing room was full when they arrived. Ambassador Thekskar stood at the front, his yellow eyes scanning the assembled staff. He was taller than most Vorthans, with scars across his gray skin that marked him as a war veteran. The room fell silent when he began to speak. "Today marks the beginning of a new era for our galaxy," Thekskar said. His voice was deep and harsh, even by Vorthan standards. "The Emergency Council session will address the greatest threat our civilization has ever faced." Do-hyun kept his expression neutral, but his mind was racing. What threat could be so serious that it required an emergency session? The galaxy had been mostly peaceful for the past 50 years. "The threat," Thekskar continued, "is humanity." Do-hyun's blood turned to ice, but he forced himself to stay calm. Around him, other Vorthan diplomats nodded in agreement. Some even smiled, showing their sharp teeth. "For too long, we have watched these humans spread across our galaxy like a disease," the ambassador said. "They learn too fast. They adapt too quickly. They take our technology and make it better. They take our knowledge and use it against us." Another Vorthan diplomat raised his hand. "Sir, what exactly is the Council planning to do about this human problem?" Thekskar's smile was cold. "The 7 major species have reached an agreement. The Vorthans, the Etherians, the Keprians, the Drakmarians, the Siltherians, the Zenth Collective, and the Voidwalkers have all voted. Humanity will be eliminated." The room erupted in cheers and applause. Do-hyun joined in, clapping his hands while his mind screamed in horror. Genocide! They were planning genocide against his entire species. "The council session tomorrow will make it official," Thekskar said. "But the real work has already begun. Our military forces are already moving into position around human colonies. In 72 hours, Not a single human will remain alive in this galaxy. Do Hyun felt sick. Billions of humans lived on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. Men, women, and children who had no idea that death was coming for them. He thought of his sister Kim Nari, who lived on the farming colony of New Seoul. She had 2 young children who called him Uncle Do-hyun in their video messages. "Sir," another diplomat asked, "what about the humans who work in our governments and businesses? Surely some of them have learned of our plans." Thexkar laughed. "Humans are terrible at hiding among us. Their biology is too different. Our security forces have already identified and eliminated most human spies in our territory. The few who remain will be caught soon enough." Do-hyun's hand moved slightly toward the hidden weapon in his jacket, but he stopped himself. Killing. Thexkar would not save his people. It would only expose him and end any chance of warning Earth about what was coming. "The beauty of this plan," the ambassador continued, "is that humans trust too easily. They believe in diplomacy and cooperation. They have no idea that we have been planning this for months. When our fleets arrive at their colonies, they will be completely unprepared." The meeting continued for another hour. Do-hyun learned that the Alien Alliance had developed something called a quantum virus. It was designed to target human DNA specifically, making it impossible for humans to survive even in sealed environments. The weapon had been tested on captured human prisoners, and it was 100% effective. When the meeting finally ended, Do-hyun excused himself and went to his small office. He sat at his desk and stared at the wall, trying to process what he had learned. 72 hours. That was all the time his species had left. He activated his computer and began to type a report, but stopped. All communications from the station were monitored. If he sent a message to Earth using normal channels, it would be intercepted. He needed another way. Do-hyun looked out his window at the massive space station around him. Somewhere in this place there had to be a way to contact Earth. He just had to find it without getting himself killed. As he sat in his office, pretending to work on translation documents, Do-hyun made a silent promise. He would find a way to warn his people. Somehow he would stop this genocide before it began. The aliens thought they knew everything about humans, but they had made one critical mistake. They had let a human hear their plans. Outside his window, alien ships moved through space, preparing for war. Do-hyun watched them and began to plan. He was one man against an entire galaxy, but he was human. And humans, as the aliens were about to learn, were very hard to kill. Do-hyun could not sleep that night. He lay in his small quarters, staring at the ceiling and thinking about what he had heard. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the faces of his family back on Earth. His parents, who ran a small restaurant in Seoul. His sister and her children on New Seoul Colony. All of them would be dead in less than 3 days. He got up and walked to his computer. If he was going to save his people, he needed to understand exactly why the aliens feared humans so much. The Vorthan embassy had access to classified Galactic Council files. As a translator, Do-hyun had clearance to read most documents. He began to search. The first file he found was titled Human Expansion Analysis, Classification Secret. Do-hyun opened it and began to read. What he found made his blood run cold. According to the report, humans had achieved in 200 years what most alien species took thousands of years to accomplish. When first contact happened in 2157, humans were barely able to travel to their own moon. Now, in 2357, human colonies existed in 47 star systems. But that was not the worst part. The report detailed how humans had taken alien technology and improved it. Vorthan energy weapons that had remained unchanged for centuries were suddenly being manufactured by humans with 50% better efficiency. Keprian medical technology that aliens considered perfect was being modified by human doctors to work on species the original creators had never imagined. Subject species demonstrates unprecedented adaptive capacity, the report stated. Human scientists require approximately 1/10 the time needed by other species to master new technologies. More concerning is their ability to combine technologies from multiple species in ways the original creators never intended. Du Hyun scrolled through page after page of examples. Human engineers who had learned Etherian crystal technology and used it to build faster-than-light communicators. Human biologists who had studied Siltherian genetics and developed treatments for diseases that had plagued aliens for millennia. Human physicists who had taken Drachmarian gravity manipulation and created entirely new forms of spacecraft. The next file was even more disturbing. It was called Human Threat Assessment and was written by Counselor Var Unix of the Keprian Empire. Do Hyun had seen Var Unix during council meetings, a giant insect-like creature with compound eyes and clicking mandibles. The report was thorough and terrifying. Human psychology differs fundamentally from all known galactic species, Var Unix had written. Most species develop a comfort zone and remain within it for thousands of years. Humans actively seek discomfort and challenge. They view obstacles as puzzles to be solved rather than warnings to be heeded. The report included transcripts of interviews with aliens who had worked closely with humans. A Vorthan engineer named Kesethai described working with a human woman named Dr. Kim So-young on a joint research project. The human female Kim So-young examined our propulsion systems for 3 days, Kesethai reported. On the 4th day, she presented modifications that increased efficiency by 30%. When I asked how she had achieved this so quickly, she said she had simply looked at the problem from a different angle. It took our best engineers 50 years to develop those systems. She improved them in less than a week. Do Hyun continued reading. The report described how humans had begun to develop abilities that should have been impossible for their species. Some humans working in high radiation environments had developed natural resistance to radiation exposure. Humans living on high-gravity worlds had grown stronger and faster than baseline humans. Most disturbing of all, some humans working with psionic species had begun to show signs of mental abilities. The human capacity for biological adaptation appears to have no limits, Var Unix concluded. If this trend continues, humans will eventually surpass all existing galactic species in every measurable category. The time to act is now, before they become unstoppable. Du Hyun leaned back in his chair, feeling sick. The aliens were not just afraid of human technology or human expansion. They were afraid that humans would replace them as the dominant species in the galaxy. Their fear was driving them to commit genocide. He opened another file, this one about the quantum virus that would be used in the attack. The technical details were beyond his understanding, but the basic concept was clear. The virus would rewrite human DNA, causing the body to attack itself. Death would be quick but painful. There was no known cure and no way to immunize against it. The virus had been tested on human prisoners captured during border conflicts. The test subjects had been told they were receiving medical treatment. Do Hyun read their final statements and had to stop several times to compose himself. One test subject, a human merchant named Captain Park Ji-min, had left a message for his family. "Tell my wife and children that I love them," he had said as the virus destroyed his body. "Tell them that I was thinking of them at the end." Do-hyun closed the file and put his head in his hands. Captain Park Ji-min was probably already dead, along with dozens of other test subjects. Their deaths had been used to perfect a weapon that would kill billions more. He opened his communication system and tried to contact Earth, but every channel was blocked. The aliens had been thorough in cutting off human communication networks. Even the emergency frequencies were being jammed. Do-hyun stood up and paced his small room. Somewhere on this massive space station, there had to be a way to get a message to Earth. He just needed to find it without attracting attention. A soft chime from his computer told him he had received a message. Do-hyun opened it and found a routine work assignment. He was to report to the station's Central Data Processing Center in the morning to help translate some old Etherian documents. It was exactly the kind of boring task that his cover identity would be given. But as Do-hyun read the assignment more carefully, he noticed something interesting. The Data Processing Center had access to all the station's communication arrays. If he could get inside and access the right systems, he might be able to send a message to Earth. It was dangerous. If he was caught, he would be tortured and killed. But if he did nothing, his entire species would die in less than 60 hours. Do-hyun looked out his window at the alien ships moving through space. Soon, those ships would carry death to human worlds across the galaxy. Children would die without understanding why. Families would be torn apart in moments. He thought about Dr. Kim So-young, the human biologist mentioned in the alien reports. She had worked to heal alien diseases, and now those same aliens wanted to kill her and every other human in existence. The irony was bitter. Do-hyun made his decision. Tomorrow, he would go to the Data Processing Center and find a way to warn Earth. He would save his people or die trying. As he prepared for what might be his last night alive, he thought about something Var Unix had written in his threat assessment. Humans view obstacles as puzzles to be solved rather than warnings to be heeded. The alien counselor had meant it as a criticism, but Do-hyun smiled grimly. It was also humanity's greatest strength. The aliens had created the perfect puzzle for him to solve: how to save an entire species with just one message. He would find a way. Do-hyun arrived at the Data Processing Center early the next morning. The facility was located in the heart of the space station, surrounded by thick walls and heavy security. Alien technicians moved between rows of massive computers that processed information from across the galaxy. A Keprian supervisor named Clixandra met him at the entrance. Her compound eyes reflected the light as she handed him a data tablet. "You are here to translate the old Etherian texts," she said in her clicking voice. "Workstation 7. Do not access any other systems." Do-hyun nodded and walked to his assigned station. The computer terminal was basic, with access only to the translation database and the documents he was supposed to work on. But Do-hyun had not survived 3 years undercover by following rules exactly as written. He began working on the Etherian texts, which were religious documents from their ancient civilization. As he translated, he carefully studied the computer system around him. The terminals were connected to the station's main network, but access was restricted by security protocols. After an hour of work, Do-hyun excused himself for a bathroom break. Instead of going to the restroom, he walked through the facility, memorizing the layout. Near the back wall, he found what he was looking for: a maintenance access panel. When he returned to his workstation, Do-hyun continued translating while planning his next move. He needed to access the communication array, but the security was too tight. Any attempt to hack the system from his terminal would trigger alarms immediately. At lunchtime, most of the alien workers left the facility. Do-hyun stayed behind, claiming he wanted to finish his assigned translation. Only a few technicians remained, and they were busy with their own tasks. Do-hyun waited until no one was watching, then slipped away from his station. He made his way to the maintenance panel he had spotted earlier. The lock was electronic, but Do-hyun had learned to hack alien security systems during his training. The panel opened with a soft click. Behind it was a maze of cables and circuit boards that controlled the facility's power systems. Do-hyun pulled out a small device from his jacket, a human-made computer interface that could connect to alien technology. Earth's engineers had designed it specifically for missions like this. As he worked to connect the device, Do-hyun heard footsteps approaching. He quickly closed the panel and pretended to examine a nearby wall display. A Drakmarian security guard walked past without looking at him. Do-hyun waited until the guard was gone, then reopened the panel. This time he successfully connected his device to the station's network. His hands shook as he activated it and began searching for communication pathways to Earth. What he found made his heart sink. Every communication channel to human space had been severed. The aliens had not just blocked human transmissions, they had physically destroyed the relay stations that carried messages between galaxies. Earth was completely isolated. But as Do-hyun dug deeper into the network, he discovered something unexpected. Hidden in the maintenance logs, he found evidence that someone else had been trying to access the communication systems. The attempts had failed, but the access codes looked human. Do-hyun traced the attempts back to their source and found a maintenance worker named Choi Min-ho. According to his personnel file, Min-ho was a Siltharian engineer who had worked on the station for 2 years. But the access patterns and the failed attempts to reach human space told a different story. Min-ho was human. Do-hyun quickly memorized Min-ho's work schedule and location. If there was another human on the station, they could work together. 2 people had a much better chance of success than 1. He disconnected his device and closed the maintenance panel, then returned to his workstation. For the rest of the afternoon, he translated Etherian texts while planning how to contact Min-ho without exposing both of them. When his shift ended, Do-hyun made his way to the station's lower levels, where Min-ho was scheduled to work. The maintenance tunnels were dark and cramped, filled with the constant hum of machinery. Do-hyun found Min-ho alone, working on a power coupling in a narrow corridor. "Excuse me," Do-hyun said in the Siltharian language. "I am looking for Junction Relay 77 Alpha." Min-ho looked up from his work. For a moment their eyes met, and Do-hyun saw recognition flicker across the other man's face. Min-ho was human, but like Do-hyun, he was wearing a biosynthetic disguise. "Junction 77 Alpha is 3 levels down," Min-ho replied carefully. "But that section is restricted. Only authorized personnel can access it." Do-hyun nodded and pretended to leave, but instead he hid around a corner and waited. 10 minutes later, Min-ho finished his work and began walking toward the maintenance lift. Do-hyun followed at a distance. Min-ho led him through a maze of corridors to an abandoned storage room deep in the station's belly. Once they were inside, Min-ho sealed the door and activated a small device that would block any listening equipment. "You are human," Min-ho said, dropping his Siltharian accent. "I can smell it. The biosynthetic disguises are good, but they cannot. Hide everything! Do Hyun removed his own voice modulator and spoke in his natural voice. My name is Lee Do-hyun. I work in the Vorthon Embassy. Are you intelligence? Choi Min-ho, engineering specialist, the other man replied. I have been here for 2 years, gathering information about alien military capabilities. What are you doing here? Do-hyun quickly explained what he had learned about the planned genocide. Min-ho's face grew pale as he listened. 72 hours? Min-ho said. That is impossible. We have monitoring stations throughout this sector. If alien fleets were moving toward human space, we would have detected them. They have been planning this for months, Do-hyun said. The fleets are already in position using stealth technology we do not understand. By the time our sensors detect them, it will be too late. Min-ho began pacing the small room. I have been trying to contact Earth for weeks, but all the communication relays have been destroyed. Without faster-than-light communication, it would take years for a message to reach human space. Do-hyun felt despair creeping in. Even with 2 humans working together, the task seemed impossible. Earth was too far away, and time was running out. Wait, Min-ho said suddenly. There might be another way. I have been studying the station's layout for 2 years. In the central core, there is an old Etherian communication array. It uses quantum entanglement technology that the Etherians developed thousands of years ago. Is it still functional? Do-hyun asked. Unknown, Min-ho replied. The Etherians abandoned it centuries ago when they developed faster methods. But if we could activate it, the signal would be instantaneous across any distance. Do-hyun felt a spark of hope. How do we access it? Min-ho pulled out a small tablet and showed Do-hyun a schematic of the station. The array is located in the most heavily secured section of the station. We would need to get past multiple security checkpoints, bypass alien technology we barely understand, and activate a machine that has been dormant for centuries. And if we are caught, torture and death, Min-ho said simply. But if we do nothing, our entire species dies anyway. Do-hyun studied the schematic. The path to the communication array led through areas he had never seen before. They would need to move carefully and trust that 2 human minds could solve problems that alien security experts thought were impossible. How long do we have? Do-hyun asked. Min-ho checked his chronometer. 51 hours until the attack begins, but we need to move tonight. Security shifts change at midnight, and that will give us the best chance of reaching the array undetected. Do-hyun nodded. In a few hours, he would either save his species or die trying. As they prepared for their mission, he thought about all the humans who were living normal lives on dozens of worlds, unaware that death was coming for them. He would not let them die without a fight. At midnight, Do-hyun and Min-ho began their mission. They moved through the station's maintenance tunnels, avoiding the main corridors where security patrols walked. The tunnels were hot and cramped, filled with pipes that carried water and air throughout the massive structure. They had been crawling for an hour when they heard voices ahead. Do-hyun and Min-ho pressed themselves against the tunnel wall and listened. 2 alien workers were talking in hushed tones. I still cannot believe the council approved this plan, said a young voice. Do-hyun recognized the accent as Etherian. Genocide is wrong no matter what species is the target. Keep your voice down, Kexavol, replied an older voice. Such talk is dangerous. The security forces are watching for dissent. Do-hyun and Min-ho exchanged glances. Not all aliens supported the genocide, This could be useful information. The aliens moved on, and the two humans continued through the tunnels. But Do-hyun could not stop thinking about what he had heard. There was opposition to the genocide plan, even among the aliens themselves. They reached the first security checkpoint an hour later. Through a ventilation grate, they could see two Drakmarian guards standing beside a heavy door. The guards were massive creatures with thick armor and energy weapons. There was no way to fight past them. Minho pointed to a service ladder that led to an upper level. They climbed carefully, trying not to make any noise. Above the checkpoint, they found another maintenance tunnel that bypassed the security door entirely. As they crawled through the tunnel, Do-hyun heard more voices. This time, the speakers were not alien workers. They were in what sounded like a meeting room, and the conversation was heated. "The genocide plan is madness," said a voice with a Siltherian accent. "Humans have never attacked any of our worlds. They are scientists and explorers, not warriors." "You sound like a human sympathizer, Jinqua," replied a harsh Vorthon voice. "Perhaps you should be reported to security." "Report me if you wish," Jinqua said, "but I will not pretend that this mass murder is justified. My trading routes take me to human colonies regularly. I have seen their families, their children. They are not the monsters the Council claims they are." Do-hyun stopped crawling and listened more carefully. It sounded like there was a group of aliens who opposed the genocide. If they could make contact with these dissidents, perhaps they could work together. Minho tapped Do-hyun on the shoulder and pointed ahead. They needed to keep moving if they wanted to reach the communication. A ray before dawn, Do-hyun reluctantly continued crawling, but he memorized the location of the meeting room. The second security checkpoint was more challenging. The guards were scanning for life signs using advanced sensors. Do-hyun and Minho had to wait in a side tunnel for nearly an hour until the guards rotated shifts. During the brief moment when the checkpoint was empty, they sprinted across the corridor and into another maintenance tunnel. They were now in the central core of the station, where the most important systems were located. The corridors here were cleaner and better lit. Security cameras watched every corner, and patrol drones floated through the air scanning for intruders. Minho led them through a maze of service passages that avoided the cameras. His knowledge of the station's layout was impressive. After 2 years of working in maintenance, he knew every hidden passage and forgotten room. "There," Minho whispered, pointing through a grate. "The Etherian communication array." Do-hyun looked into a large chamber filled with crystalline structures that glowed with soft blue light. The crystals were arranged in complex patterns, connected by golden wires that hummed with energy. At the center of the room was a control console covered with symbols that looked like flowing water. "How do we get inside?" Do-hyun asked. Minho showed him another passage that led to the chamber's lower level. They crawled through narrow pipes filled with cooling fluid until they reached a maintenance hatch directly under the communication array. Minho slowly opened the hatch and peered into the chamber. It was empty, but they could hear the footsteps of guards patrolling outside. They had perhaps 30 minutes before the next security sweep. They climbed into the chamber and approached the control console. The Etherian symbols were unlike anything Do-hyun had seen before. They seemed to shift and change as he looked at them, making his eyes water. "Can you read this?" Do-hyun asked. Minho shook his head. "Etherian writing is beyond my training. We need someone who understands their language and technology." Do-hyun thought about the young Etherian named Kexvol, who had spoken against the genocide in the tunnel. He also remembered the meeting room where aliens had argued about the morality of mass murder. Perhaps some of these dissidents could help. "I have an idea," Do-hyun said. "But it is very dangerous." He explained his plan to contact the alien dissidents. Minho looked skeptical. "You want to reveal ourselves to aliens we know nothing about? That could get us killed immediately. If we cannot activate this array ourselves, we need help," Do-hyun said. "And we heard them speaking against the genocide. They might be willing to work with us." Minho considered this for a moment. "Even if they help us, how do we know they will not betray us later?" "We do not," Do-hyun admitted. "But sometimes, you must trust people if you want to survive." They heard footsteps approaching the chamber. Quickly, they climbed back through the maintenance hatch and sealed it behind them. The security sweep passed overhead, and they waited in the cramped pipe until the guards moved on. "If we are going to contact these dissidents, we need to do it soon," Minho said. "We have less than 40 hours before the attack begins." Do-hyun nodded. They made their way back through the maintenance tunnels toward the meeting room where he had heard the aliens arguing. It took them 2 hours to reach the location, and by then, the meeting had ended. But as they prepared to leave, Do-hyun heard a single voice in the room. Someone was still there talking quietly to themselves. He listened through the ventilation grate and recognized the Siltharian accent of Jinhwa, the traitor who had defended humans. "This is our chance," Do-hyun whispered to Minho. Before Minho could object, Do-hyun opened the grate and dropped into the room. Jinhwa spun around in surprise, reaching for a weapon. She was a tall, slender creature with silver skin and large black eyes. "Please do not call security," Do-hyun said, removing his voice modulator. "I heard what you said about humans. I think we can help each other." Jinhwa stared at him in shock. "You are human. How did you get onto this station?" "That is not important right now," Do-hyun said. "What matters is that in 38 hours, your government will murder billions of innocent people. You said you have been to human colonies. You know we are not monsters." Jinhwa slowly lowered her weapon. "You know about the genocide plan?" "I know everything," Do-hyun said. "The quantum virus, the fleet positions, the timeline. I also know that some aliens oppose this plan. The question is, are you willing to help stop it?" Jinhwa was quiet for a long moment. Then she activated a jamming device similar to the one Minho used. "What do you need?" she asked. Do-hyun felt a surge of hope. For the first time since learning about the genocide, he was not alone. With alien allies, they might actually have a chance to save his species. "We need to access the Etherian communication array in the central core," Do-hyun said. "But we cannot read their language or operate their technology." "I know someone who can," Jinhwa said. "But contacting him will be dangerous for all of us." "Everything we do from now on will be dangerous," Do-hyun replied. "But doing nothing means watching my people die." Jinhwa nodded slowly. "Then we had better get started." Jinhwa led Do-hyun and Minho through hidden passages to a restricted section of the station. Here, ancient Etherian archives were stored in crystalline chambers that had not been opened for centuries. The air smelled of ozone and old memories. "Zenthara lives here," Jinhwa explained in a whisper. "She is the oldest Etherian on the station, and one of the few who remembers the old technologies. But she is also considered dangerous by the current government. They found Zenthara in a chamber, filled with floating crystals that glowed with soft light. She was ancient even by Etherian standards, her translucent skin showing the blue veins beneath. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind through crystal caves. "I know why you have come," Zenthara said before anyone could speak. "The young, Siltherian trader seeks knowledge to save the humans, but you bring humans with you hidden beneath false skins." Do-hyun and Minho looked at each other in alarm. Their disguises had fooled every scanner on the station, but this ancient Etherian had seen through them immediately. "You need not fear me," Zenthara continued. "I have lived for 3,000 years, and I have seen many species rise and fall. The current plan to destroy humanity is both foolish and tragic." "Then you will help us?" Do-hyun asked, dropping. His disguise is voice modulation. Zenthara moved to one of the floating crystals and touched it gently. Images appeared in the air around them, star maps, alien worlds, and creatures Do-hyun had never seen before. To understand why the galaxy fears humans, you must understand what humans truly are, Zenthara said. "What I am about to show you has been hidden for millennia, known only to the oldest of my people." The images changed, showing a galaxy that looked very different from the current one. The stars were arranged differently, and unfamiliar worlds orbited in impossible configurations. Long ago, this galaxy was ruled by a species called the Architects, Zenthara said. They were beings of incredible power and wisdom, capable of creating life itself. For millions of years, they shaped worlds and guided the development of countless species. Do-hyun watched in fascination as the images showed massive structures being built around stars and new forms of life being created in vast laboratories. "But the architects grew lonely," Zenthara continued. "All the species they had created were limited by their design. The architects wanted to create something new, a species that could grow beyond any boundaries, that could adapt and change, without limits." The images now showed a small blue world that Do-hyun recognized as Earth in its ancient past. They chose a young world with simple life forms and began their greatest experiment. They planted genetic sequences that would remain dormant for millions of years, waiting for the right conditions to activate. When those sequences finally awakened, they would create a species unlike any other. Do-hyun felt his heart racing. "You are saying that humans were created by these architects?" "Not created," Zenthara corrected. "Enhanced. The architects took existing life and gave it the potential for unlimited growth. But their experiment was never completed. The images shifted to show massive wars across the galaxy. Worlds burned and entire star systems were destroyed. A great catastrophe struck the galaxy, Zenthara said. The details are lost to time, but the architects vanished almost overnight. They left behind only ruins and the seeds they had planted on countless worlds. "What happened to the other seeded worlds?" Minho asked. "Most failed," Zenthara replied sadly. "The genetic sequences were too complex to activate without guidance. A few species showed promise for a time, but they eventually stagnated or destroyed themselves. Only one world succeeded." "Earth," Do-hyun whispered. "Yes. For unknown reasons, the sequences in humans activated perfectly. You became everything the architects hoped for, a species capable of infinite adaptation and growth. But this also makes you incredibly dangerous to the existing order." Jinhua spoke up. "This is why the Council fears humans so much. They know that if humans continue to develop, they will eventually surpass every other species in the galaxy." Zenthara nodded. The current galactic powers have built their civilizations on the assumption that change happens slowly, over thousands of years. Humans change and adapt in decades. To them, you represent chaos and the end of their control. Do-hyun thought about all the reports he had read about human achievements. Suddenly, it all made sense. Humans were not just naturally gifted, they were designed to be superior. Is there proof of this? He asked. Something that could convince the galaxy that humans have a right to exist? Zenthara touched another crystal, and new images appeared. These showed an ancient chamber hidden deep within the space station itself. The architects left one final gift, she said. A repository of their knowledge, hidden in the deepest parts of this station. The Etherians built this station around the repository, but we never managed to access it. The security system only responds to architect genetic patterns that humans carry, Do-hyun said, understanding immediately. Exactly. If you can reach the repository and activate it, you will have proof that humans are the rightful inheritors of the architect's legacy. The genetic evidence alone would force the galaxy to recognize humanity's claim. Minho looked at the star charts floating around them. Where is this repository? In the station's core, 3 levels below the communication array you were trying to reach, Zenthara said. But the path is heavily guarded, and the architect's security systems are still active after millions of years. What kind of security systems? Do-hyun asked. Unknown, Zenthara admitted. No one has ever gotten close enough to study them. But the architects were masters of technology that we still do not understand. Expect anything. Jinhua activated her communication device and checked the time. We have less than 30 hours before the genocide begins. Even if we reach this repository, how does that save the human colonies? The repository contains more than just historical records, Zenthara said. It holds architect technology that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. Communication systems that work across any distance instantly, defense systems that could protect entire worlds, weapons that could stop any fleet. Do-hyun felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. The repository could save his people, but it could also make humans into the very threat the aliens feared. There is something else, Zenthara said, her voice growing serious. The genetic sequences in humans are still evolving. Each generation becomes more capable than the last. If humans survive the next few decades, they will develop abilities that no other species possesses. What kind of abilities? Minho asked. The power to manipulate matter at the quantum level, telepathic communication across vast distances, the ability to exist in environments that would kill any other life form, perhaps even the power to travel between dimensions. Do-hyun stared at the ancient Etherian. The scope of what she was describing was almost impossible to believe. In other words, he said slowly, humans will become like the architects themselves. Yes, Zenthara said, and that is exactly what the galaxy fears most. They would rather commit genocide than allow humans to reach their full potential. Do-hyun looked at Minho and Jinhua. The mission had become much more complicated than simply warning Earth about an attack. They were now racing to claim humanity's birthright before it was destroyed forever. How do we reach the repository? Do-hyun asked. Zenthara showed them a new path through the station, one that avoided most of the security checkpoints, but required them to pass through areas where the architect technology was still active. Be careful, she warned. The architects protected their secrets well. Many of the defenses are designed to test worthiness rather than simply kill intruders. But failure still means death. As they prepared to leave, Zenthara gave Do-hyun a small crystal pendant. "This will help you interface with architect technology," she said. "But remember, once you activate the repository, there will be no hiding what humans truly are. The galaxy will never see your species the same way again." Do-hyun put the pendant around his neck and felt it warm against his skin. For the first time since learning about the genocide, he felt like they had a real chance to save his people. But he also knew that success would change everything. Humans would no longer be just another species struggling to survive in a hostile galaxy. They would be the inheritors of the most advanced civilization that had ever existed. The question was, would humanity be worthy of that inheritance? The path to the architect repository led through sections of the station that had been abandoned for centuries. The corridors here were different from the rest of the station. The walls were made of a black material that seemed to absorb light, and strange symbols glowed faintly in the darkness. Do-hyun, Min-ho, and Jin-kwa moved carefully through these ancient passages. The air felt thick and heavy, charged with energy that made their skin tingle. According to Zenthara's directions, they needed to descend 5 more levels to reach the repository. "The gravity feels different here," Min-ho whispered, as they climbed down a spiral staircase that seemed to go on forever. Do-hyun had noticed it too. Each step felt lighter than it should, as if the normal laws of physics worked differently in this part of the station. The pendant Zenthara had given him was growing warmer against his chest. They reached the first architect security checkpoint after an hour of walking. It looked like a simple doorway, but as they approached, the symbols on the walls began to glow brighter. A voice spoke in a language none of them had ever heard, but somehow Do-hyun understood the words. "State your lineage and purpose," the voice said. Do-hyun stepped forward, touching the pendant through his shirt. "I am a descendant of the seeded worlds, seeking knowledge to protect my people." The doorway shimmered and became transparent. They walked through and found themselves in a vast chamber filled with floating platforms connected by bridges of solid light. Each platform held different pieces of technology, machines that hummed with power, crystals that pulsed with data streams, and devices whose purpose was completely unknown. "This is just a storage room," Jin-kwa said in amazement. "If this is how the architects stored their spare equipment, what must their actual cities have looked like?" They crossed the chamber on bridges that supported their weight despite being made of nothing but light. The second security checkpoint was more challenging. It required Do-hyun to place his hand on a scanning device that analyzed his genetic structure down to the quantum level. "Architect heritage confirmed," the scanning device announced. "Genetic potential. Extraordinary. Access granted to historical archives." The next chamber contained something that took Do-hyun's breath away. Floating in the center of the room was a perfect holographic representation of the galaxy as it had existed millions of years ago. Thousands of worlds glowed with the light of architect civilization, connected by streams of energy that showed trade routes and communication networks. "They controlled the entire galaxy," Min-ho said softly. "Every star system, every world." Do-hyun walked closer to the hologram and touched one of the glowing points. Instantly, information flooded his mind. Images, sounds, and concepts that his brain could barely process. He saw architect cities that floated in space without any visible support. He saw beings of pure energy that could reshape matter with their thoughts. He saw the moment when everything began to fall apart. "The war!" Do-hyun gasped, pulling his hand back from the hologram. "They fought something terrible, something that came from outside the galaxy." Before he could explain further, Alarms began sounding throughout the chamber. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, and automated voices announced an urgent message in dozens of languages. All personnel report to battle stations. The human genocide fleet has begun its final approach. Estimated time to target, 24 hours. Do-hyun felt his blood turn to ice. They had lost more time than he realized navigating the Architect's security systems. The alien fleets were already moving toward human space. "We need to reach the repository now," he said urgently. "There is no more time for careful exploration." They ran through the remaining chambers, bypassing security systems that would have normally required hours to navigate safely. The pendant around Do-hyun's neck was now hot enough to burn his skin, but it was also opening doors that should have been impossible to unlock. The final chamber was different from all the others. It was small and circular, with walls made of the same black material as the corridors. At the center stood a single pedestal holding a crystalline structure that pulsed with inner light. "The Architect Repository," Jinhua breathed. Do-hyun approached the pedestal carefully. The crystal was beautiful, but alien, shaped like a flower made of pure energy. As he reached toward it, the crystal began to sing, a sound like the birth of stars and the whisper of solar winds. The moment his fingers touched the crystal, the world exploded into light and sound and impossible sensations. Do-hyun's consciousness was pulled out of his body and flung across space and time. He saw the rise and fall of the architects, the seeding of countless worlds, and the great war that ended their civilization. But more importantly, he saw the communication network the architects had built. It still existed, hidden beneath the foundations of the current galactic infrastructure. With the right access codes, he could send a message to every world in the galaxy simultaneously. Do-hyun focused his thoughts and reached out through the network. He felt his consciousness touch the edge of human space, where massive alien fleets were positioning themselves around defenseless colonies. He reached farther, finding Earth itself, where Admiral Kang Yujin was desperately trying to organize a defense against an enemy that seemed to come from nowhere. "Admiral Kang," Do-hyun projected his thoughts across impossible distances. "This is Agent Lee Do-hyun. Can you hear me?" The response came back instantly, filled with surprise and relief. "Do-hyun? How are you contacting me? Our entire communication network has been destroyed. I am using architect technology from inside the alien space station," Do-hyun explained quickly. "Listen carefully. The aliens have developed a quantum virus designed to kill humans. Traditional defenses will not work. You need to evacuate the colonies immediately." "Evacuate 47 worlds in 24 hours?" Admiral Kang's mental voice was strained. "That is impossible. We do not have enough ships." "Then we need to find another way," Do-hyun said. Through the Architect network, he could see the alien fleets clearly now. Hundreds of ships carrying death toward human worlds. But he could also see something else. Weaknesses in their formation, gaps in their coordination. "Admiral, I am sending you tactical data now," Do-hyun said. He pushed information through. The network, fleet positions, weapons specifications, command structures. The alien alliance is not as unified as they pretend. If we can break their coordination, their entire plan will collapse. "Understood," Admiral Kang replied. "But Do-hyun, even with this information, we are outnumbered 50-1. We need more than tactical advantages." Do-hyun delved deeper into the Architect Repository, searching for weapons or defensive systems that could protect human worlds. What he found was both encouraging and terrifying. The architects had built planetary defense networks that could protect entire worlds from any attack. The technology was still functional, hidden on dozens of worlds throughout the galaxy. But activating these defenses would reveal to everyone that humans were the architects' chosen inheritors. Admiral, I can activate defense systems on our worlds. But there will be consequences, Do-hyun explained. Once the galaxy sees what humans are capable of, they will either bow to us or unite against us completely. Do it, Admiral Kang said without hesitation. Our people are dying. I will deal with the political consequences later. Do-hyun began the activation sequence, feeling the ancient defense networks respond to his commands. On New Seoul, massive, crystalline structures erupted from the ground around the capital city. On Armstrong Colony, energy shields appeared in the sky, glowing like aurora. On dozens of human worlds, architect technology that had slept for millions of years suddenly came to life. But as the defenses activated, Do-hyun felt something else stirring in the galaxy. The network was sending signals to locations he had not contacted, ancient architect facilities on alien worlds, sleeping technologies that had been hidden for eons. "What have I done?" Do-hyun whispered as he felt the scope of what he had unleashed. Through the network, he could sense the panic spreading among the alien fleets as they encountered defenses they could not understand or overcome. But he could also sense something else. Other consciousnesses touching the network, beings who had been waiting for centuries for someone to activate the architect legacy. The galaxy was about to change in ways that no one could predict, and humanity was at the center of it all. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in chaos as reports flooded in from the genocide fleets. Weapons that had never failed were suddenly useless against mysterious energy shields. Ships that had dominated battlefields for centuries found themselves trapped by technology they could not understand. Ambassador Thexkar stood at his command console, his gray face twisted with rage as he watched his carefully planned genocide fall apart in real time. "Report!" he shouted at Akeprian Communications. "Officer, the Third Fleet reports total weapon failure against New Seoul Colony," the officer replied, his insect voice clicking with panic. "Their quantum virus deployment systems have been neutralized by unknown energy fields." "What about the human homeworld?" demanded Counselor Var-Unix. "Seventh Fleet is retreating from Earth space," came another report. They encountered massive defensive platforms that appeared from nowhere. Admiral Korthmek requests immediate reinforcements. High Arbiter Zelthara, the ancient Etherian who moderated the council, stood slowly from her crystalline throne. Her voice carried across the chamber like the whisper of cosmic winds. "Something is activating technologies that should not exist," she said. "I am detecting architect energy signatures across the galaxy." The word architect sent a chill through the assembled delegates. Most species had legends about the ancient builders, but few believed they had been real. Those who knew the truth had kept it secret for millennia. "Impossible," Thexkar snarled. "The architects have been extinct for millions of years." "Their technology is not extinct," Zelthara replied, "and it appears to be responding to human genetic patterns." In the back of the chamber, Do-hyun felt his disguise beginning to fail. The pendant around his neck was glowing so brightly that it was visible through his shirt. His biosynthetic skin was heating up as the architect technology in his bloodstream activated. But he no longer cared about hiding. Through the network, he could feel the alien fleets retreating in confusion and fear. Human colonies that should have been burning were now protected by energy shields that made them untouchable. The genocide had failed. Now it was time for the truth. Do-hyun stood up from his seat in the diplomatic section and began walking toward the center of the chamber. Alien delegates turned to stare as his disguise finally dissolved completely, revealing his human features. "Security!" Thexkar roared. "Seize that human spy!" Drakmarian guards rushed toward Do-hyun, but their weapons simply passed through him, without effect. The architect technology had made him temporarily invulnerable, protected by energy fields that existed in dimensions the aliens could not touch. Do-hyun reached the center of the chamber and touched the communications console. Instantly, his voice was broadcast to every world in the galaxy, carried by the ancient network that the architects had built. "People of the galaxy," Do-hyun said, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "My name is Lee Do-hyun, and I am human. For the past 6 months I have lived among you, learned your languages, and observed your cultures. Today I watched your leaders plan the murder of my entire species." The chamber fell silent except for the humming of alien weapons that could not fire and the clicking of recording devices that were broadcasting everything across the galaxy. "You fear humans because we adapt quickly and learn fast," Do-hyun continued. "You call us dangerous because we do not accept limitations. You want to kill us because you think we will replace you. But you do not understand what humans really are." Do-hyun activated a holographic projector and filled the chamber with images from the architect repository. The assembled delegates gasped as they saw the true history of their galaxy, worlds shaped by beings of incredible power, species guided and nurtured, and finally, the Great War that ended it all. "Humans are not invaders," Do-hyun said. "We are the inheritors of the galaxy's oldest civilization. The architects created us to be their successors, to continue their work of building and protecting life throughout the stars." Thexkar tried to speak, but his voice was drowned out by the sound of energy weapons firing uselessly at Do-hyun's protective fields. "Your fleets are retreating because they cannot fight architect technology," Do-hyun said. "But I am not here to threaten you. I am here to offer you a choice." The holographic display changed, showing the current state of the galaxy. Alien fleets scattered in retreat, human worlds protected by energy shields, and ancient architecta. Facilities awakening on dozens of planets. You can continue to fight us, in which case you will lose, Do-hyun said simply. The architects built weapons that could destroy stars and defenses that could protect entire solar systems. That technology now responds to human commands. Fear rippled through the assembled delegates. Some were already activating emergency communication devices, calling for their fleets to withdraw from human space entirely. "Or," Do-hyun continued, "you can work with us to build something better. The architects fell because they became isolated and proud. They forgot that diversity makes civilizations stronger. Humans will not make that mistake." A young Etherian in the diplomatic section stood up. Do-hyun recognized him as Kexvol, the scientist who had spoken against the genocide. "What are you proposing?" Kexvol asked. "A new galactic council," Do-hyun replied. "One that includes all species as equals, where technology and knowledge are shared freely. The architect legacy belongs to everyone, not just humans. But the age of a few species dominating all others is over." Thexkar finally found his voice. "You expect us to bow to human supremacy? I expect you to accept human partnership," Do-hyun corrected. "The alternative is to face the same fate as those who opposed the architects millions of years ago. The holographic display showed images of dead worlds and shattered fleets from the ancient war. The message was clear. The galaxy had seen what happened to those who fought against architect technology. High Arbiter Zelthara stepped down from her throne and approached Do-hyun. Her ancient eyes studied his face carefully. "You speak of partnership, but you hold all the power," she said. "How do we know humans will not become tyrants like the species that came before?" Do-hyun thought of his sister and her children on New Seoul, of the human colonies filled with families just trying to build peaceful lives among the stars. "Because that is not who we are," he said. "Humans have always been strongest when working together with others. We do not want to rule the galaxy. We want to explore it, learn from it, and help it grow." Jinhua stood up in the traders section and activated her voice amplifier. "I have worked with humans for years," she said. "They are exactly what they claim to be, explorers and builders, not conquerors." More voices began to speak up around the chamber. Younger delegates who had opposed the genocide plan stepped forward to support Do-hyun's proposal. Older delegates argued furiously, but their words carried less weight as reports continued to arrive about the failure of their fleets. "The human fleets are not pursuing our retreating forces," reported a Drakmarian officer. "They are sending medical aid to ships damaged in the fighting." This news caused another stir in the chamber. Even in victory, humans were showing mercy to their enemies. Thexkar made one last desperate attempt to salvage his position. "This human has infiltrated our government. He has lied to us for months. How can we trust anything he says?" Do-hyun looked directly at the Vorthon ambassador. "You are right. I did lie to you. I pretended to be something I was not. But I did it to save my people from genocide." "What did you lie about, Ambassador? What excuse do you have for planning mass murder?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Around the galaxy, billions of beings were watching the confrontation, waiting to see how their leaders would respond. High Arbiter Zelthara raised her hand for silence. When the chamber quieted, she spoke in a voice that carried the weight of millennia. "The Etherian Republic votes to accept the human proposal for a new galactic council," she said. "The age of fear must end. The age of cooperation must begin." One by one, other delegates began to stand and announce their support. Not all of them, Thexkar and several other hardliners, refused to accept the new reality. But enough voted in favor that the decision was clear. As the chamber erupted in debate and discussion, Do-hyun felt a hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Minho, who had somehow made his way through the chaos. "The network is showing massive changes across the galaxy," Minho said quietly. "Architect facilities are coming online everywhere. It is going to take years to understand what we have unleashed." Do-hyun nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. He had saved his people, but he had also changed the fundamental balance of power in the galaxy. "We had better make sure we are worthy of what we have inherited," he said. Through the Architect network, he could feel the pulse of a galaxy in transition. Old powers were falling, new alliances were forming, and humanity stood at the center of it all. The age of hiding was over. The age of humanity had begun. 1 year later, Lee Do-hyun stood in the rebuilt Galactic Council chamber, looking out at representatives from over 200 species. The chamber itself had been redesigned using a blend of human engineering and architect technology, creating a space that felt both ancient and modern. Gone were the rigid hierarchies and restricted seating of the old council. The new chamber was arranged in concentric circles, with every species given equal representation regardless of their military power or economic influence. At the center stood a holographic display that showed real-time information from across the galaxy, available to all delegates simultaneously. Du Hyun wore the simple robes of the First Arbiter, a position created specifically for him after the transition. Unlike the old High Arbiters who ruled through tradition and authority, Do Hyun's role was to facilitate cooperation and mediate disputes. The title carried great honor but little actual power, exactly as he had wanted it. The Council recognizes Ambassador Kexavol of the Etherian Republic, Do Hyun said, activating the speaking platform. Kexavol had grown in confidence over the past year, becoming one of the strongest advocates for the new galactic order. His research into architect technology had helped dozens of species upgrade their infrastructure and improve their quality of life. "Thank you, First Arbiter," Kexavol said. "I am pleased to report that the joint human-Etherian colony on Kepler 438b has exceeded all expectations. The integration of architect environmental controls with Etherian crystal technology has created the most efficient agricultural system in the galaxy." Murmurs of approval rippled through the chamber. The new colony was just one of dozens of cooperative projects that had emerged since the formation of the new Galactic Council. Species that had barely spoken to each other for centuries were now working together on everything from scientific research to cultural exchange. "The Keprian Collective wishes to add to that report," said Councillor Varyunix, rising from her seat. The old Warhawk had surprised everyone by becoming one of the most enthusiastic supporters of cooperation. "Our medical researchers have combined human adaptability studies with Keprian bioengineering to develop treatments for 17 previously incurable diseases." Du Hyun smiled as he remembered the first time he had met Varyunix, when she was writing reports about the human threat. Now she was leading joint research projects that had saved millions of lives across multiple species. But not everything had been smooth. The transition to the new order had created significant challenges, and some species still refused to participate. "The Council recognizes the representative of the Drakmarian Empire," Do Hyun said, though he knew what was coming. Ambassador Gorthmek stood slowly, his massive frame casting a shadow across the chamber. Unlike many of his colleagues, the Drakmarian had never accepted the new reality. "The Drakmarian Empire continues to object to human leadership of this council," Gorthmek growled. "Your species has been in space for barely 2 centuries. What right do you have to reshape galactic civilization?" It was the same argument Gorthmek made at every session. Do Hyun had learned to address it with patience rather than anger. "Ambassador Gorthmek, humans do not lead this council," Do Hyun replied calmly. "Every species has an equal voice in our decisions. The architect technology responds to human genetics, but we have shared that technology freely with anyone who wishes to use it. And yet you sit in the position of highest authority," Gorthmek countered. "I sit in the position of greatest responsibility," Do Hyun corrected. "My role is to serve this council, not to rule it. If the representatives vote to replace me, I will step down immediately." This exchange had become a ritual, but Do Hyun knew it served an important purpose. It reminded everyone that the new system was built on consent rather than force. Jinhua activated her speaking platform from the traders section. Over the past year, she had become one of Do Hyun's closest advisors, helping to design trade agreements that benefited all species equally. Perhaps Ambassador Gorthmek would prefer to return to the old system, Jinhua said with a slight smile. Where the strongest species dominated the weakest, and technological advancement was hoarded rather than shared. Several younger delegates chuckled at this. The old Galactic Council had been notoriously corrupt and inefficient, dominated by a handful of species that cared more about maintaining power than solving problems. The old system had order, Gorthmek replied stubbornly. The old system had stagnation, said a new voice. Do-hyun turned to see Dr. Kim So-young entering the chamber. As the head of the new Interspecies Genetic Cooperation Institute, she had become one of the most respected scientists in the galaxy. Dr. Kim, Do-hyun said, you are not scheduled to address the council today. I apologize for the interruption, First Arbiter, Dr. Kim said, but I have news that cannot wait. Our research team has made a breakthrough that changes everything we thought we knew about galactic evolution. She activated a holographic display that filled the chamber with complex genetic charts and evolutionary trees. Do-hyun could see the excitement in her eyes as she prepared to share her discovery. For the past year, we have been studying the genetic legacy of the architects across multiple species, Dr. Kim explained. We knew that humans carried enhanced genetic sequences, but we assumed we were unique. The holographic display shifted to show genetic samples from dozens of different species. We were wrong, Dr. Kim continued. Every intelligent species in the galaxy carries traces of architect genetic modification. Humans simply had the right environmental conditions for those modifications to activate fully. A stunned silence fell over the chamber. Do-hyun felt his heart racing as he processed the implications of what Dr. Kim was saying. You are telling us that all of our species were touched by the architects? Keksaval asked, his voice filled with wonder. More than touched, Dr. Kim replied. You were all designed to work together. The genetic modifications in each species complement those in others. Humans adapt quickly, but Etherians process information in ways we cannot. Caprians have biological systems that humans could never develop naturally. Siltherians have sensory capabilities that are unique in the galaxy. Var Unix stood up excitedly. This explains why our joint research projects have been so successful. We are not just cooperating. We are fulfilling our original design. The implications were staggering. The architects had not just created humans as their inheritors. They had designed an entire galaxy of species to work together as a unified civilization. What about the species that are not represented here? Do-hyun asked, thinking of the Drakmarian Empire and other groups that had rejected the new council. Their genetic patterns show the same modifications, Dr. Kim said. They are as much a part of this design as anyone else. The architects intended for all of us to build something greater than any single species could achieve. Gorthmek had been listening in silence, but now he stood again. For the first time since Do-hyun had known him, the Drakmarian ambassador looked uncertain. If what you say is true, Gorthmek said slowly, then the Drakmarian Empire has been mistaken in its isolation. Do-hyun saw an opportunity and seized it. Ambassador, your people have always valued strength and honor. What could be more honorable than fulfilling the purpose you were created for? The chamber waited breathlessly as Gorthmek considered this. Finally, the massive alien nodded slowly. The Drakmarian Empire requests membership in the new Galactic Council, he said formally. The chamber erupted in cheers and applause. Do-hyun felt tears in his eyes as he watched former enemies embrace and shake hands. Even species that had been at war for centuries were setting aside their differences in light of this revelation. But as the celebration continued, Do-hyun thought about the deeper implications of Dr. Kim's discovery. If the architects had designed all galactic species to work together, what had caused their civilization to fall? What enemy had been powerful enough to defeat beings who could reshape entire galaxies? Minho appeared at his side, having served as Do-hyun's assistant throughout the past year. "The Architect Network is showing increased activity," he said quietly. "Something is responding to all the cooperation and technological advancement." Do-hyun felt a chill run down his spine. Through the quantum network, he could sense something stirring in the dark spaces between galaxies, something that had been waiting patiently for millions of years. "Whatever destroyed the architects," Do-hyun said softly, "it may still be out there." Minho nodded grimly. "Which means this new golden age we are building might also be preparation for a war we cannot yet imagine." Do-hyun looked out at the celebrating delegates, humans, aliens, former enemies, all working together toward a common future. They had achieved something that most species thought impossible: true galactic unity. But as he felt the ancient network pulse with new energy, Do-hyun realized that their greatest challenges might still lie ahead. The architects had created them to work together, but they had also created them to face something terrible. "Let them celebrate tonight," Do-hyun said, watching as Jinhwa taught a group of young delegates a Siltherian dancing song. "Tomorrow we will..."